Hi, welcome to How Literature Can Save the World, where we explore the written word's impact on our culture and our relationships with ourselves, each other, and the environment. I'm your host, Michelle R. Brady. Grab a drink or a blanket or an animal to pet, and let's begin to make our lives more meaningful, one book at a time.
The trouble that mankind makes is that he thinks he's Italian, he's German, he's Spanish. We're all humans on this beautiful paradise is our earth.
I am really excited about today's guest. His name is Dr. Matthew Krajniak. He's the executive editor of Consequence Forum, which is a nonprofit addressing the human consequences of war through literature, art, and community events. He earned his PhD in literature and creative writing at the University of Houston as a C. Glenn Cambor Fellow. He co-edited Wendy Battin on the life and work of an American master, and his writing has appeared in Gulf Coast, Poetry Foundation, Willows Wept Review, the Avalon Literary Review, Wax Paper, and elsewhere. And before we talk to Matthew, I just wanted to say a word about Consequence because it's a pretty interesting and a little bit different literary magazine than, some of the more general ones that we know about. This one's specific mission is to provide the public with works and voices from around the world to promote a clearer and more nuanced understanding of what's at stake in choosing to wage war or engage in conflict. And I think their mission and the work that they do is really important. And it's been important for me is sort of a shared experience with other people who've been involved in geopolitical violence. And what I really love about their forum is that it's not just for military personnel or veterans. I mean, it's for anyone who's been on any side of conflict in any capacity. And you really get a sense of the scope of harm that waging war or engaging in any kind of conflict like this can really inflict on so many different people and in ways you might not expect. So, without further ado, here is Dr. Krajniak. So, you are probably the most educated, at least in writing and literature, person that I have interviewed or probably even met. Could you tell us about your path to your doctorate and why you chose to pursue both an MFA and a PhD?
My path to my doctorate was not conventional as far as I've seen. In that, I was in a field that I was very happy to be in. I worked in social services for over a decade, working with a variety of different populations, from mentally ill men to severely emotionally disturbed adolescents. And as I said, I really enjoyed the field. But as many people who have worked in social services can speak about, there's a high rate of burnout. Now, obviously, you're working with a population or populations that are taxing. And so I found myself in my early 30s, in a place where I needed to make some changes, basically. And, I'd always been writing ever since I can remember. And I know there was a problem in junior high when I was writing a short story that had aliens and some other things in it that weren't acceptable in the Catholic school that I was going to. And I know I got into some trouble. So that was one of my earlier memories of writing. I thought, well, why not? Let's take a look at MFA programs and how I can kind of situate myself with writing more at the center of my life. And I was fortunate to get into a studio program, which was a priority for me. This is at the University of Memphis, and studio program simply meaning that there was more of a focus on the writing part than the reading and literature part. In fact, you could work it so that you didn't have to take any literature classes. And that sounded great to me at the time. And what I found, though, was that I wanted more when I got to the University of Memphis. And when I say more, I simply mean I wanted more context. I wanted to understand better the stories that I was reading, where they had come from, where they got their inspiration and what people thought about them and the analysis and all of that. I just wanted more. And so I found myself not taking more workshops, although I took plenty of those, but I also took quite a few literature courses. And I found that I just really enjoy talking about, reading about, thinking about literature and kind of living in that whole world there. And so when it came time to graduate, there was a couple of different options for me, but one that kind of kept sticking out was this idea of pursuing a PhD. And so I talked to a few people about their experiences, and it sounded very attractive to me. And that might sound strange to some folks because I think pretty much everybody knows that there's a lot of work that goes into a PhD. But, like I said, I just wanted more. And so I was fortunate enough to get a couple offers, and one of them was at a very well funded school, University of Houston. And so I enrolled there, and would I do it again? I don't know. I know when people ask me about, pursuing a PhD, my kind of stock answer is, make sure you know why you want to get that PhD, because there's going to come a point where you really question why you're doing what you're doing, because it can be very emotionally and mentally taxing. And if you don't have a firm understanding of why you're pursuing this degree, then tendency is to either take a break or just stop completely. And certainly, I've seen that happen any number of times. But my experience was very good.
I think that brings me to another question about your path to consequence. Even if it had nothing to do with editing, like I know you did a lot of social work, what steps and what work, did you do on your path to coming to consequence for him?
Well, certainly the social work and consequence are tied together. As I noted, I worked in social services for over 10 years and really enjoyed the work. And that's something that I found myself returning to when I was in graduate school, this thought of service work. And, I enjoyed my time in graduate school, and, it gives you a lot of that space to work on your work. And I took full advantage of that. But, for me, my experiences showed that after, a year or two of really focusing on my, fiction, spending the majority of my day, reading short stories or novels or working on the things that I was working on, that it didn't provide as much satisfaction as working with other people, being a part of a community and in some way feeling like I was helping individuals. There's really a part of me that chases after that really enjoys that experience. And so, although the social service work didn't necessarily reveal that to me, I kind of knew this for a long time. It certainly is yet another example of it, and consequence is also another example of it. So, after my graduate school life was done, well, even before it was done, I was already looking for ways to engage in service work. I was thankful enough, and that might sound strange to be thankful for, the teaching that I was given to do, right, as a GA, whatnot. But I was thankful that I had that work because it provided that sense of service again, and I love teaching. These things were formative in a sense, but that part of me was already formed, and even before I started with social service work. So consequence is definitely an extension of that, and part of the reason why I love doing that work is because I get to be part of a community that is hopefully helping other people, whether that be just providing work that might not otherwise be published, or might not get the exposure that consequence tries to give its authors, but also because we do explicit service work, right? We do workshops. We have another program that we're putting together that concerns editorial work. So, meaning that if you have a piece or any kind of writing, I shouldn't limit it to maybe short stories or smaller pieces because we're certainly looking at longer pieces too, novels, whatnot. But creating an editorial service, meaning that we're going to help people try to craft their work so that it's ready to publish. There'll be more about that coming out in the months to come, but it's still an early idea. But the idea of it now is that it's just another example of service work that Consequence is trying to engage with, because that's something that I very much believe in. And as far as, some of the editing work that I've done that led me to Consequence, because I think that's important to note, is I worked on any number of literary journals before Consequence, and not only were they informative to my own work and showing me how to better craft a story, put together a narrative, sentences, and all the above. I mean, there's nothing quite like that feeling of reading something, not liking it, and then realizing that they're doing a lot of the same things that you do in your own work. It really showed me that this idea of being part of a literary journal, literary endeavor, that was something that I wanted more in my life. You put all these things together, this idea of really not wanting just to spend my time writing, and this exposure to literary journals and this idea of service, and next thing the this opportunity comes along with Consequence, and it's just a great fit. And I'm eternally thankful that George, wrote the mission as he did, that his focus, he's a Vietnam vet, and he was concerned about the understanding of war from people who weren't involved in it. And that mission is basically to address the human consequences of war. It resonates with so many people, and that's what I've been trying to do for the past 5 years now.
Yeah, and it seems like it's going really well. The Substack piece is really interesting to me. It seems like a rapidly growing, and I feel like I read somewhere that Substack is like substantive follower, real follower, people
Oh,
who really read things and who want, not just quote unquote content, but they want to change the way they think. They are interested and curious about someone else's opinion. And I myself have found it to be, exactly that. And I think it was a great move. I don't know how you feel about how it's going or if you can comment, but
yeah.
up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I completely, agree with you as far as the power of Substack. So many people, that I speak with now, just especially with everything that's going on in the world, it's tough, with the news, they get what feels like genuine, thought and, honest kind of responses. I hear so many people, at least that I talk to, who, would rather go to Substack than, even like the New York Times or Post or anything like that. They would rather, they have a few people that they follow or a number of people they follow. So I think it's really turning into a very powerful platform. It kind of already was, but yeah, as far as Consequence goes, it's wonderful because we're very committed to accessibility. And so we were trying, but we're also a nonprofit that doesn't have, it's not, we're not affiliated with the university. We don't have an organizational benefactor, corporate benefactor, anything like that, so we have to figure out revenue on our own. And we didn't want to put a paywall on the website, because, personally, I hate paywalls. I understand them,
Yeah.
but we wanted to make sure that people could always have access to the work that we were publishing. And on Substack, we could do that, but also, generate a little bit of revenue. The way that we do it is that we publish 3 times a week, and then Monday and Wednesday are free, and then Friday is a paid post, and usually that paid post. But you can, I don't think this is a big secret, but you can get around that by, give like a one-time free preview use. So not everything, even though it says it's paid, it actually isn't. But we can move everything from the Friday paid posts over to the website eventually. But for like the first month or so, it's behind the paywall. So it gives us a little bit of a chance to, stick to our core values while also trying to generate a little bit of revenue. And thankfully, we've had a really good response on Substack, as you said. We've been producing some good work there, and we're just really happy with what we do publish. And what's even better about it is that all that work from when George was publishing volume after volume is that we're able to dip back into those pieces and republish them.
Yeah,
So, I think,
which is really cool.
yeah, I mean, as writers, you're always, especially in today's day and age, it's like If you're getting published in print, it's, your audience is probably going to be pretty limited. And then if you're online, there might be a chance for a bigger audience to see you. But, it's only a few days before the next thing comes out, or, whatever, people's attention span. So this is a way for writers to have their work seen more than just when it first comes out. And I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, but it's also really cool to have, some more historical reminders of, how ubiquitous these problems really are and going through them in the 80s and we're going through them now
Yeah.
and it's just kind of incredible. And I think if you can recall my stance on reading and writing, literature about geopolitical violence and how I fully believe that unless people can experience it through some way, shape, or form, and the easiest one is to read. I mean, it's the easiest way to gain empathy. You don't have to actually get shot.
Mm.
I think it's really difficult for people to realize the impacts that it has. You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to point fingers, or our goal is to, the old, one of the functions of art is to hold up a mirror. We're not trying to be provocative, although sometimes, just because of the things that we're publishing, I think we inadvertently are, and I know we inadvertently are. We don't ever really mean to be. Um, and so, that kind of informs, what we are trying to do. So, and to an extent of that is how capable we are with change, or even the idea of thinking that we're going to be able to create change. I think, for us, the idea is really just try to create awareness,
Yeah.
and not get too much more ambitious than that. I mean, certainly I would love, for us to have a bigger impact than, creating awareness, which is not to belittle creating awareness. And as you just said, sometimes, reading is the only way that we can let other people know about experiences other than our own. But there is a real urge at times to try to, be more proactive, and to hope that we're doing, this, that, or the other. And I think that that's not a recipe for satisfaction or feeling good about the work that you're doing, because at the end of the day, it is art, and
Yeah.
people are going to take from it what they want to take from it, if they want to take anything at all from it. And so all we can do is present it, put it out there, and at that point, in a sense, our job ends. So there's a certain amount of relief in that, because then I don't get so worked up about
Right.
I get worked up about it personally, but from a professional standpoint, I recognize that the poems that we're publishing about Gaza Strip or whatever
Mm.
else, if the ceasefire doesn't happen when we publish the poem, I'm not all upset like, "Oh, what am I doing?" or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, an extreme example, but, yeah.
That's a very reasonable response.
Yeah, 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 right, right. So, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough, you just see all the things that are going on, and you have this platform, and you just like, "How can I use this?" But, you have to resist that urge, because the idea is to generate conversation, to increase awareness, and that nothing will shut that down quicker than having a political agenda.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the idea is that people have the conversations and come to their own conclusions, not that you are pushing a
yeah,
conclusion.
absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I did see, and forgive me if I am saying this incorrectly, but I saw something, maybe it was on Substack, but it was something about, a reader was concerned that Consequence only, wrote about, like, anti-war work, or am I wrong? Did I read that somewhere else? I think
Oh,
my thing with it was, like, who's writing pro-war?
yeah,
Like, I mean, and not that they necessarily have to have a stance at all, but I mean, I doubt that you read any war literature and come out of it thinking, "Man, that's something I wanna do. I love that."
yeah.
You don't have to have a position, it's not like just because bad things happen in the story or poem, it doesn't mean that that's your position, it just means that's the story.
Exactly, exactly, and I don't ever wanna hide behind that, because obviously if we're publishing something, we're, tacitly or even not tacitly endorsing it. I don't know, I vaguely recall right now what you were referencing, but we get a number of comments that people are irritated by what we're doing or publishing. And that's especially true if we do anything, especially 2 years ago, anything that had to do with the Middle East. I mean, it was, as any of us have experienced, trying to talk about that with a friend or a family, just an absolute powder keg. So, yeah, but we still wanted to be engaged and hopefully promote a conversation around that. And when we get comments or pushback, it's always, we always kind of check our motives and have conversations within the organization about, what is it that we're actually doing? Is there credence to what this person is saying, whatnot? So, but yeah, we're not interested really in pro-war publications, but I would love, for us to have uh, work that maybe talked about some of the necessities of uh, defending oneself, defending a country, because though this a misconception is that we're anti-war, and certainly we aren't pro-war or anything like that, but we're really more of war being the very, 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 very last option,
Right.
to defending oneself and using everything else first before. Because the idea is that trying to avoid the consequences of war at all costs. So, but to find something that is somehow balanced while not being kind of pro-war, is something that hasn't happened yet. But I'm always kind of in search of those pieces that somehow articulate an idea that maybe there's I don't want to say justification, but that isn't that is somewhere in the middle,
Right.
basically. That's not left or right, but somewhere in the middle, I think is probably the best way to say it. So yeah.
Yeah, sort of an extrapolation from, like, people come into your house and rob you, and you had to defend yourself. The same thing is true
Exactly.
on a national scale at certain times. Yeah, I can see that, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. So now, sorry, now that we are more than halfway through, let me ask you the main things.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so I mainly want to know, and I know this is super broad, but what books, poetry, essays helped shape who you are? And you can specify that, for different things like in childhood or to be a writer or to be, anything. I'm going to be writing all this down. I think that it's really useful
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, it started off with the Choose Your Own Adventures book.
I know.
But
Yes.
that's really, I think, I grew up in the early '80s, and I think there was only 100 of them. I don't even know if, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot more now, but I had them on my bookshelf. I had at least 40 of them or something along those lines. And there's something also about the kind of collectability of those because they're numbered and like, oh, I'm missing 15 through 18. I need to get those. But that shaped a lot of, well, it certainly had a foundational effect on my view of prose and plot, of adventure, of not knowing what was gonna happen next, and agency, and there's any number of things that I work on now that I could probably trace back, to that reading experience. It was, very formative, for me. Um, and then after that, by 15 or 16, as I was saying, I was, getting into the beats,
Mhm.
Kerouac and all that, and Ginsberg, and, On the Road was something that was just, yeah, exactly the kind of thing I wanted to be doing, just free and, having these kind of wild adventures, and certainly art was going to be mixed into that, and I just love that whole kind of, way of life and thinking, and certainly I emulated it to a small degree
Of course.
for a short period of time. But yeah, you can't do a whole lot when you're living like that. I can't do a whole lot that's I don't know, healthy, which is uh, um but, yeah, and then, the first, author that I really kind of cite as my, kind of bedrock of, like, I'm not big on idol worship. It's just not something that, people are people.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's a person that I idolized. His name is Brees DJ Pancake. That's his actual name.
That's awesome.
And the short stories of Brees DJ Pancake was the only thing he published. And I don't, if I'm remembering right, he didn't even get to see it published because he took his own life before it was fully out. But like he was publishing in like, the Atlantic and things like that. He was at the University of Virginia under James McPherson, and just this guy who was from West Virginia, and he had a very distinct point of view, and that was to champion Appalachia, because it had been kicked around so much, and it still is. And he very much wanted to tell the stories of those people in that place. And his writing is just, it's so dark and it's so dense. I always kind of say that, if you've lost a pet recently, you don't want to read his work because it's tough. But I emulated his tone, his density in language, his use of plot, and any number of other things. And it's still somebody I had to go back to time and time again. But yeah, and I always kind of mention him too because not many people have heard of him.
Yeah.
Because he only had that one like early collection in the '80s, whatnot. But um, yeah, and then, from there, I mean, you gotta mention The Bluest Eye,
Yeah.
Toni Morrison, who, for my money is probably one of the greatest prose writers I've ever read.
I just reread that actually last week.
Is that right?
Yeah. Sometimes you just like I said earlier, you don't wanna try and not like something. I just wanted to do something I knew, and I
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and she's, I mean, to try to emulate her, you can't. I mean, it can be intimidating, but I mean, so many things can be craft wise. So many things can be learned from what she does, and of course, there's Alice Munro, and I know she's problematic of late because some of the things that have been revealed about the way that she lived her life, but looking at the way that she engaged her art form, from a craft perspective, somebody I very much, again, emulate, or try to anyways. I really enjoy stories that have depth to them, that can feel like you're just getting a slice of a larger world.
Yeah.
And I think she's somebody who does that very, very well. Well, hell, she won, some pretty big prizes because of her writing. Um, so yeah, and then moving on over maybe into the nonfiction world. I'm trying to think of who I've been. There's anybody? Joanne Beard is somebody who this was maybe a couple years ago, but I came across because of a story. Oh, I can't remember how I came across it, but once I got to there's in her collection, there's a story, and I don't want to spoil it, but the very horrible thing that happens in this story, and you just when you're reading it, you feel like this is almost fiction because it's so unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where kind of like, and let me date myself, when when you're listening to a tape that you bought just because of one song.
Yeah.
And then on the B side, you find something that's like, oh my God, this is freaking amazing. And nobody ever talks about this. That was kind of how the experience I had with this. It's like, how have I never heard about this essay by her?
That's awesome.
So yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, certainly I could go on and on, with writers that I've just fallen in love with, and go back to time and again. It's yeah, it's a beautiful thing being able to sit with a book. Something that I don't know. It's not a dying thing, but certainly there's just so many other things going on these days with I don't want to sound like a Luddite, but electronics and whatnot. Just the simple joy of sitting with a paper bound together with words on it that all add up to something greater than the words themselves is just a wonderful experience. So
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I've only recorded a few of these so far, but one of the things I have really enjoyed is hearing of people's, muses, so to speak, or things that really affected them that people I've never heard of before. And it really
Yeah.
like goes to show you that, these are really personal experiences. They could be published and out there for the world to see, but when you're holding it, it's a different story. It's a story that's just for you and it affects you. And I think it also really brings up the subjectivity of everything. And when you submit to literary magazines or wherever, or for books and querying, I think it can be hard. And you think there are good writers or there are bad writers, but they're just different. And people respond to a certain style or certain subject matter, and some don't. And it doesn't mean that your work is bad. There's no such thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just really
I mean,
interesting.
yeah, and that's I mean, it's yeah, if anybody who's listening to this doesn't know that, I mean, absolutely what Miss Chef just said is 100% accurate. It's a very subjective thing. I mean, to the point of where you fall in the submission queue, if the editor has read 3 pieces before yours and is just trying to get to 5 pieces before dinner or whatever, if you're the 4th or 5th piece that's being read, the chances are that you're going to get a clean read are a little bit less, because at that point the person is probably a little bit tired, especially if the pieces before yours haven't been that good. They're probably a little irritated or whatnot. So it's always a numbers game for the most part. I mean, certainly some people, once you're established, you don't have to go through as much of that. But for those of us who are just still kind of sending out, to the unsolicited slush pile. It's a numbers game often.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you said that because if you're established, that means you have a bio, and when you have a bio, people will give you more close attention generally, and I don't like that. I think it causes a halo effect, and I think you can miss really great stuff. I think that some people are over celebrated, and I think sometimes editors choose work that they don't really resonate with just because it seems like it's the most prestigious person submitting. I don't know if this is true. This is just how I
Yeah.
feel. So we don't allow bios, but I wondered how, I mean, just to be honest, I mean, I had bios at first and I found them too compelling. I couldn't not see them, and it affected the decisions I made, and I just didn't really like that. But I wondered if how you get around it, or if what you do with that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. I learned early on that I didn't care for bios. And when I was, a reader and I, by the time I get things now in consequence, so you've been read so many times, I don't necessarily worry about it, but we could be influenced. But, I had never read them when I was like a first reader, whatnot, because just as you said, didn't want to get influenced. Not only that, people lie,
They do?
it's,
No, they don't.
oh yeah, I know, right?
No, they don't. No, you could look it up.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's like, why would you say you got published in Brevity last year when I can just go to Brevity and look it up, And it's just people, it's almost like you get more irritated that they're a bad liar than they are just lying. If you're gonna lie, be good about it. But yeah, so I don't read. I'm not a big fan of bios. Exactly for that reason. And in fact, a consequence we try to publish anywhere from 80 to 90% of slush pile submissions.
That's kind of
Think
amazing,
that
by the way, which I'm sure you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah, and because I hear you. I mean, I'm not gonna name names, but I think we can all probably think of a few publications where it's like you're just publishing, 1 or 2 of this poet or of this author, and that's, and because they have 10 books out, it makes your publication look better, and it's just like there's so many people out there doing great work who are unheralded, and that's how they become, better known and more people can read their work is by, publications such as ours and many, many others who, give them a chance. And so, as somebody who doesn't have 10 books out, I'm very much invested in
Yeah.
making sure people who don't have a large platform, are able to potentially get one. So, yeah.
It's cool too because I mean, not so much for my magazine because we don't edit anything, but for yours that, not only are you giving people a chance and, freshening everyone else's drink, so to speak, from the same stuff that they've been drinking forever, but also, helping them learn how to be better. And it's kind of it's really it is a service, I would say.
Mm.
I think anyway. But not to make you feel uncomfortable.
No, not at all, not at all. We're in fact, I mean, I'll give a plug. We're gonna actually start editorial services here in the next like 3 or 4 months. It's
Awesome.
going to be so not even so. Yeah, well, I don't need to get too far into it, but we're big believers of service work. So we do have workshops. We do help writers with editing. We just finished up a grant funded project. It was a young writers nonfiction project, which was almost exclusively working with young writers to help them get a piece into shapes that we would publish or that they could send off for publication. So, I mean, my social service background plays a large role in what we do here, and I completely agree that service work is something that's needed and can be quite wonderful for everybody involved.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a really, really cool thing. Yeah, I love all of that. And also, you can feel free to plug anything you wanna plug because that's all part of this, right? Like, people need to know this stuff, and
Yeah,
they don't know.
you're right.
So, but before you do that, I did wanna know if you have any other tips for writers. You do have a lot of experience, not just, education, but also experience
Mhm.
editing, and I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I think that goes to that's applicable to all writers is understanding who you are as a writer, or better yet, what role writing plays in your life. I mean, I think this is especially difficult for any culture, but especially one that's so steeped in a capitalistic culture,
Yeah.
basically, where end product and what's this in function for or in service for, and what's the return, the ROI,
Yeah.
and all these other things. Whereas art, thankfully, isn't a part of that mechanism, or at least not fully. You don't need to be selling art in order to do it, right? So,
Right.
but understanding that kind of alien experience is something that it takes anybody, I'd imagine, a little bit of time, but especially when you're being told that the thing that you're doing doesn't have maybe any practical end goal.
Mhm.
So, why are you doing it? And so you're kind of, you're constantly getting this feedback that the thing that you're doing is devalued. And certainly a writer who tries to do any freelance work knows that when you're getting paid per penny per word, that's kind of reinforced that, what, this is not a form that maybe is as valued as it should be. But getting that relationship right with yourself as who you are as a writer, why you're doing it, is something that I think, a question that you can be asking yourself throughout your writing practice, your writing career, your writing hobby, again, however you want to define it. And once I think you get a better understanding of that, then the writing becomes even more pleasurable, or at least has a clear sense of purpose. Because as we were just talking about before, if you're feeling like I'm writing to earn money,
Mhm.
and which you absolutely can, and I'm not saying, but that's a whole different relationship to your work, and so
It makes it work instead of something that you're
exactly.
doing. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly, exactly. So, yeah, that would be my kind of first thing is, what is it that you hope to achieve by, sacrificing parts of your day, parts of your week, or however much you're sitting down at the table because you're doing writing instead of something else. So, understanding why you're doing writing instead of that other thing, is something that I think is very valuable for any writer.
That is the first time somebody said that. I think that's yeah, I really appreciate that. The experience itself was the end game, like, the result was in how I felt about all of it afterwards, and I think, if that's what it is and you can get paid for it, great, and if you can't, at least you got that, and that's probably worth
Yeah.
more anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So what did I not ask?
I mean, the only things that I can really think of is just to kind of replug the fact that, we Consequence does have writing workshops. Um, we put on 15 this year. We're hoping to get up to 18 or 20 next year. This is really the next year will be the third full year that we've returned to it. George, the founder, did a few here and there, free ones for vets. And whereas we're trying to broaden the series, whatnot. So, we're really invested in not only helping people with ideas or developing ideas and developing craft, but also finding community. because as I'm sure you know, Michelle, and anybody who writes, it could be a lonely prospect.
Yep.
Kind of banging your head against the desk trying to figure out, dialogue or whatever. So this is an opportunity to meet some other people who like to do that stuff too, so that maybe it's a little less painful. But yeah, so we have writing workshops coming up. They'll start up again in February because as we learned last year, there's not a whole lot of people that have free time during the holidays. So yeah, writing workshops, and then we have a new issue coming out. There'll be a live stream of the launch, and we're having thankfully there's a lot. Like I said, the mission is such an attractive part of the organization that President Emerita of Harvard, Drew Gilpin Faust, is the honorary chair of our launch on Veterans Day. This is in Boston, and then we're having Massachusetts' first poet laureate, Reggie Gibson, do some readings for us. He read for us at our last in-person launch, and he's a former. I can't remember his credentials exactly, but he was a former slam poet champion in Chicago.
Whoa, so cool.
He's the kind of person you want to hear, read.
Yeah.
He's just full of life. But yeah, we have a launch coming up, and anybody listening to this, it'll be on the website.
I'll be there.
To
Online only.
or online, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, outside of that, Michelle, this was a great experience. I
Super
really
fun.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and in the words of my daughter,
let's hip hop our way out.